you know, I mean, this when Emmett Till winds up losing his life because somebody said he whistled at a white girl, at a white woman, and there was so much of that going on that a lot of black people lived in a state of kind of collective trauma. There's still some collective trauma,
yes, sir,
in the black community. Now,
yes,
my mom and all of my aunts and uncles were very resilient, and she passed that resiliency down.
SouLivate.
Can't you see? You got to use up money. Can't you see? Got to use our money. We got to keep it. Must be used. Drugs, education, and for schools where it's needed. And you know, and I remember I let my mom hear those lyrics, thinking she's gonna be, you know, all real cool up with it. And she said, "No." She said, "Don't write that."
Really?
she said,
Really?
"Don't send that to school. Don't send that to school."
Why though? Why?
What's
Why?
that?
Why? Why do you think?
Well,
she said
for the same reason, in the mindset, like if you go a generation back, one of my younger aunts, smart as can be, back then, the Dr. King movement wanted to take her from North Carolina and bring her back down to Atlanta to help teach people to read, you know, because back in those days you couldn't vote unless you could show that you could read.
Yes, sir.
You know, so she wanted to do it. The revolutionary in her wanted to do it. My grandparents said, "You're not going down there," because they could see the danger in it. Okay, so this is probably 1974, 5, in Virginia, jewel of the Confederacy, still trying to, you know, our high school was named after a slave plantation.
Wow.
You know, Denby was still trying to figure it out, and she was like, "You don't need," I'm putting myself in her head. She was probably saying, "You don't need to be the black kid setting them up to go in there and start indicting everybody out loud."
She was afraid for you, basically, right?
Yeah. She
Which is
me to grow up.
understandable.
Yeah, she's thinking like a parent. She's thinking like an artist. She's like, I need you to come home safely. So you don't need to go up, because she also knows me, right?
Yeah.
She knows me, and if I have a point, I'm gonna keep going, right? Now I'm talking about money that's being used for this that could be used for that. Eventually, I'm gonna be headed to the heart of the matter, and then it's gonna get, you know what I mean? The stakes are gonna rise.
Yeah.
And she was basically like, I'm putting myself in her shoes. Yeah. She's probably saying, "I don't want that for you yet."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But at the time, I didn't get it. I was like, well, I'm thinking to myself, this is like, you know, we're always trying to help those at the bottom.
So hold on a second. So this is so incredible, man, because this is what I wanted to get down to. Where do you think you got that spirit in you? I won't be afraid to say revolutionary spirit, that in 9th or 10th grade, you're 15, 16, you're not only thinking about these things, you're putting it down on paper. Like, where did that come from?
Well, I mean, you can't say definitively, like we don't give ourselves life. We don't give ourselves personality. We make use of what we're given, right? So I look at the particulars of my life. I was born on December the 15th, 1961. That's the 170th anniversary of the ratification of the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, right? Like that. I didn't do that on purpose. That's just the way it was. 1961 is 100 years after the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. December 15th, 99 years later, after the ratification of the Bill of Rights, is the killing of Sitting Bull, right? So, December 15th, I don't know. It seems like, to me, it seems like I'm born at a certain time on a certain date to do some certain things. I didn't know it at the time, but I certainly felt the vibe to help people and be able to put our problems into words in a way that we could solve them. You know what I mean? And I'm still there. I'm still there now, and I'm optimistic. I always say, if I have to when I do a motivational speech, I start with, I'm so optimistic. My blood type is B positive. That's my blood type. I mean, so I've always wanted to. That's always been a part of me. But I mean, it's been a part of. It was a part of my parents too. But as a parent, you have a different impetus than you do as a child. Like, my mom wants her kid to stay safe.
Yeah.
So she in the state of Virginia, she could see the potential of where that danger is going to be with this kid who starts indicting the system as a high school student. So, as an adult, I understand it. As a child, it caught me by surprise.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something that you already know, that nothing is on accident.
That's
So
right.
by you being born on the day that you were born, the stars aligned a certain way.
I think
And
so.
yeah, and I do also believe that we are born with certain characteristics that stick with us throughout life. And it's not genetics, and it's not, it's something spiritual. Um, but still, it's easy to say, like, I was born with this, I felt this, but can you maybe describe, because you're a teenager, you're 15, you're 16, it's the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
you're down south, like, what were some of the things that you were seeing going on in the world that you didn't agree with?
Well, so both of my parents, my mom was born in 1934. My dad was born in 1930 in North Carolina.
Wow. That was still
So
Jim Crow, right?
the Jimmyest of Jim Crow.
Right, right.
Yeah, so they grew up in that. So
Mhm.
my mom, especially my dad too. Dads want to make sure you're safe, but mom is sort of fine tuning things, and she knows who the country is because she's lived through it, and she wants to make sure that her children can navigate it.
Mm,
So we always knew what was right and wrong, and what was culturally right and wrong. And me always being expressive, I wanted to write about it.
wow.
That was my first instinct, was to write about those things because of what they had told us about how they grew up. Like my mom, the things I remember, she would talk about how y'all talk about you don't like to go to school. She said we love going to school because it got us out of the cotton field or
Mm,
the tobacco field,
mhm,
right? So even though slavery had long been over, you still live in a very slave-like life,
mm.
in that you get up in the morning. What she called, we used to work from can't see to, how did she say it? We used to work from can see to can't,
Mm,
basically from when you can see to when you can't see, and they be harvesting tobacco or picking cotton. And when school came, you loved school because it got you out of the cotton field.
yes, sir.
They remembered, you know, lynchings and beatings, and my dad. I remember him being concerned that we didn't think that all white people were bad. And he would tell the story of the black man being chased by the white mob, and he ran into a house and hid up the chimney. And everybody fans out, and one of the white mob guys goes and looks up the chimney and looks right at him, and then he yells to everybody, "There's nobody up here," and he leaves, and he saves that guy's life. And he would use that story to say, all white people aren't bad people.
Mm,
So they wanted to make sure that we had balance, but they wanted to make sure that we knew the world that we were living in too. So
Sir.
my mom made sure, like, she could see the education for us starting to fall off. So she went, because she was, if you go back farther, like people the generation of my parents, there's a lot of them either with no education or a sixth grade education. You hear a lot of sixth
Sir.
grade educations.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because initially, okay, black folks are slaves. You know, it's illegal for them to learn.
Yes, sir.
And then the law says you have to teach them. So they separate schools. Black folks lived in, went to inferior schools. Like
Mm-hmm.
my mom, at one time, they were going to a school with all 12 grades and one teacher, right? And they would, the white kids would ride by and spit at them off the school bus and all of that. A lot of the Jim Crow cities didn't have a high school to give you a diploma. So my mom was fortunate enough they built a high school where she lived, and she was the valedictorian. She was the
Wow.
smartest kid in the school.
Wow.
So when she had us, she could see that the schooling wasn't very good. So she went and bought flashcards and made sure that, we could add, subtract, multiply. We knew all of our phonics, that we could read like that, because she knew that was essential. Because that used to be the way they would hold black folks back, by
Mm.
giving you either no education or an inferior education, and then go, "Why are you so dumb?" You know what I mean? And then accuse you of being dumb. So my parents were always preparing us for this world that they knew wasn't necessarily ready for children that were excelling. But
Mm.
she wanted to make sure we knew how to excel. She wanted to make sure that we were strong enough to handle adversity, because she could see us getting better on instruments. She knows there's a good chance the instrument thing doesn't work, and whether it does or whether it doesn't, it's still going to be important that you're the right kind of person. So
Yes.
that's what she worked on. Like, the thing that she would tell us, she would say, I'll tell you, like my father used to tell me, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you've seen the most important person that you're going to meet that day, but
Wow.
you're no more important than anybody else. Right? Well,
Wow.
that's an important thing to say to a third grader who's playing in a nightclub, being told how good he is.
Wow.
Right? If you start, it's easy to start believing it as a child. We see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Child actors, or they think you're something special, and then all of a sudden you grow up and you're just another adult, and a lot of them don't know how to handle themselves. So my mom was always very vigilant on what kind of people we were. Every now and then she'd check in with us. She'd be like, "So what are you doing? What are you doing with yourself?" And we always were very focused and driven as it came to music. Well, I'm doing 250 push-ups a day. I'm
Mm-hmm.
running 3 miles a day. I'm practicing, whatever that amount of hours it was a day. And she said, "Well, what does any of that have to do with me?" And
Mm.
basically, her question is like, "What are you doing for other people? What are you
Right.
doing that's going to impact the rest of us? I can see
Wow.
what you're doing for yourself, but what are
Mm-hmm.
you?" So that's what she would work on. So every now and then, people would see the brothers play, and they go, "Oh, Mrs. Wooten, aren't you so proud? All 5 of your sons are so talented." And she would say, "I'm not proud because they can play music well." She said, "That's all they've done their whole life. By now, they ought to be good at it." So
Wow.
anybody that done one thing their whole life ought to be good at it by now. But she said, "But if you tell me that you look up to them, or if you tell me that they inspire you, or if you tell me that they helped you," she said, "that makes me proud, because that's what I worked on." So,
Wow.
mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to say that them 500 push-ups looks like they paid off, man.
Yeah.
um, Second of all, Joseph, if you don't mind, what was your mother's name? Because I want her. I want to shout her out.
Her name was Dorothy. She was born Dorothy Gray Woodard, and Gray had that E on the end. She loved that E, Graye. Dorothy Gray Woodard. And then she married a Wooten, and she was Dorothy Gray Wooten.
Wow.
And yeah, just a very wise woman. Everybody who ever met her, she made them feel like they were her favorite.
Wow.
Everybody that ever met my mom feel like they got a special relationship, that only they had with her. And it was the truth. She was that kind of person. She would always leave you with some wisdom that you could hang your life on. Like everybody is, it's fun to hear people tell what they remember about her. And it's the same with us. When you, the way that I'm talking to you now is the way that she would talk. I got it from her.
Yes,
She's
sir.
very, very inspiring person, and you would benefit from from her wisdom. She used to say that she was glad she grew up poor
Yeah.
because the she knew uh, she knew the gifts that it gave her
The
that people
value,
that have never had the struggle don't get.
the value. You
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
I wanted to add something to this because it seems like in the Western culture, we're being taught that you got to show off like you're tough and things like that, and this is why sometimes when people see me on a podcast and I'm praising like people, I want you to know and everyone to know that people that have actually gone through like bad things, like someone like myself that has been through war zones and countries falling apart and not having
Hmm.
anything to eat. And it reminds me of your mother, that people that went through that struggle, we're not afraid to show kindness.
Right.
We're not afraid to tell one another, like I would tell Joseph right now, look, I appreciate you. I appreciate that you are here. You are wonderful. You're amazing. You inspire all of us.
Hmm.
And this is not blowing smoke up in you know what. This is
Yeah.
something that comes from the heart, and we're not afraid to say it. So now when you're talking about your mother, it kind of reminds me of someone that has really seen struggles in life.
Oh my goodness.
This is SouLivate.
Well, see, my parents have been through it. I mean, back in those days, just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or and just somebody taking something wrong, everybody knew somebody who had lost their life that way. You know what I mean? This is in the days when, you know, I mean, this is when Emmett Till winds up losing his life because somebody said he whistled at a white girl,
Hmm.
at a white woman. And there was so much of that going on that a lot of black people lived in a state of kind of collective trauma. There's still some collective trauma
Yes, sir.
in the black community. Now,
Yes,
my mom and all of my aunts and uncles were very resilient, and she passed that resiliency down. But it's the same resiliency that recognizes that a little ninth grader getting ready to be a 10th grader doesn't need to come in with his hair on fire, indicting the system.
blasting everybody, right?
Yeah, blasting everybody. You don't
Yeah.
really know enough yet.
She
You know,
wanted you
you know
guys
what
to
you're.
do it smart. She
Yeah,
wanted
you know
you
what
guys
you're
to do it.
talking about, but you're probably not ready for that backlash yet,
Yeah.
right? So she knew that I knew what I was talking about, and she knew I could make a point. I'm putting myself in her shoes,
Yes, sir.
and she was probably saying to herself, "You need to wait on that a bit because I see where this is headed." Right. Right now we're talking about money appropriation. Eventually, we're going to start talking about who owned the land first and all that stuff that, yeah,
Crazy.
has caused people harm. But the main thing is my mom especially was concerned with what kind of people we are. She
Yes,
wanted to make sure that we were articulate and we had integrity and we carried ourselves well. And she knew that people were looking up to us, so she wanted to make sure that we were the kind of people that it would be right for them to look up to. And those things that she knew was important, she called it. I want to make sure y'all have a strong foundation, because if you have a strong foundation, you can make it through anything.
yes, sir.
And they knew that it was important because they had been through some of anything. You know,
Hmm.
my dad fought in the Korean War, watched a lot of his white compatriots get medals, and his commanding officer just tell all the black soldiers, "You're not getting a medal
Crazy.
because you're black." You know what I
Crazy.
mean? In no uncertain terms, and that was just your life, right?
Yeah.
That's why World War II. I just found this out. World War II. A lot of black people were ambivalent about fighting World War II because they're like, you're trying to get us to fight for these people's freedom. We don't have freedom here.
Yes, sir.
And they knew that they were fighting for their freedom here and abroad, which is why a lot of black folks used to do the double peace signs.
Mm-hmm.
Our victory and their victory.
Mm.
Our victory and their victory. Not just, yeah, everybody was doing the peace sign. Black folks were doing the double peace sign.
Wow.
And it was like the sort of the silent protest.
Yes, sir.
You know, because you're fighting, like my daddy's fighting for freedom that he didn't have.
Mm.
You know, you go and, you know, especially all the black soldiers that are right on the front line, and you come right back to having to get off the sidewalk when a white man's walking down the street. You can't pass a white car on the highway.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, during World War II, man, it reminds me they even had to, you know, get Joe Louis, you know, a public figure to join the military in order to kind of, you know, get the rest of the black folks to try to, you know, join the military. And then I'm a big boxing guy. It reminds me.
I am too. I love boxing, man. Don't get me started.
Yeah, it reminds me also Muhammad Ali, man. He won the gold medal, came back to the States, went to the restaurant, he wouldn't get served. So
Right.
he took his gold medal, he threw it in the Mississippi River.
He sure did.
But that's that's what I wanted to ask you though. So
before we leave Joe Louis though, Joe Louis, they got Joe Louis to represent the United States because he's like, you know, the world's most famous athlete. He's the heavyweight champion. So he does all of these free boxing exhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets back and they start indicting him on his taxes. All these free things he did for the federal government.
Crazy.
And they started indicting him on his taxes. So a lot of those fights where he took a beating when he was old, he's fighting because he needed money. You know, for this government that he took care of didn't take care of him. And that was kind of the theme. This country that largely black folks built,
yes, sir,
was not taking care of them.
Yes, sir.
And that's a heavy point. Before you start trying to make that point out in public, you got to be ready for the backlash. And I'm sure that's what my mom was recognizing when I'm in like the 9th grade, 10th grade, whatever that is. And I'm about to, you know.
Yeah. Talking about you sending money to space and all that, man.
Yeah. Like, instead of feeding people.
Yeah, man. That's heavy. So this is what I'm really like interested in, because, and I'm sincerely, you know, curious about this because, again, you know, I'm a Slavic kid, like I'm an American, but yet I'm an outsider too. So meaning, you know, I wasn't born and raised here, so I miss out on a lot of cultural things. So when you're a teenager and, you know, you're feeling the way you're feeling at that time, if you can remember, are you aware of yourself as a black musician? Are you aware that you're having a black experience, or are you just Joseoph Wooten, a human being? And like, can you kind of break that down to me? How does that work, man?
All of it mixes in together. Like when I born in Ohio, lived in Idaho, don't really remember that because Victor's just 3 years younger than me. I remember learning to play in Hawaii. We go to California, that's where we start playing on stages. That's where we start making money. We opened for Curtis Mayfield. We moved to Virginia. Now, California was as liberal as can be. The teachers were young. They were asking the students to call them by their first name. They wanted us to feel like the teachers were one of them. My mom and dad, they from the South. They're like, you're not calling your teacher by their first name. You're calling them Mr. or Mrs. whatever. But the mindset was very liberal. They wanted the kids to get outside and play. And we had children of all ethnicities, right? I mean, we had friends of all ethnicities. We moved to Virginia. Now, Virginia, it was the jewel of the Confederacy. Everything in Virginia is named after the Confederacy. You know, Lee Highway, and you used to go to Virginia Military Institute and you'd salute Stonewall Jackson before you could go eat and all that stuff.
Wow.
So as soon as I got to Virginia, there was a principal. Her name was Mrs. Smith. She was at least 70 years old.
Mm.
She probably 80 in 1972, which means she was born somewhere around the turn of the century.
Wow.
When I get to the school, I just remember it didn't say nothing except the name of the school and the year 1919, Hilton 1919. Well, 1919 was about the most racially vicious year. They used to call it the Red Summer, when
Mm.
there's just lynchings all over the place.
Mm.
And so here was this little musician kid. And also in the 70s, what the big issue was in the beginning part of the 70s, that's when the issue was busing. They were forcing integration, right? So if you were zoned here, then whoever's here has to go to school there. So the rich houses were up on the banks of the James River. We lived in this black neighborhood. So
Mm.
they used to bus us 30 minutes up
Wow.
to go to school where the white kids were. And I remember all the white parents waiting right outside the door to get their children and walk them home. I don't know what they thought we were going to do to those kids. We
Mm.
would get on the school bus, and all the parents would come and walk their kids back to the big houses.
That's crazy.
And those were just the times. So to go to your question, in school, I was just another one of the kids. You know what I mean? But when I get to Virginia, the principal is singling me out and being especially hard on me. Now I didn't understand it. I just knew she's being disrespectful. My mom recognized the racial component because I'm this little musician kid,
Yeah.
right? I'm a little musician kid. I was just on stage last night in a nightclub, and now you're expecting me to be yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, and so she was always on my case about talking too loud
Mm.
and all of those things, and she had loud talked me, so I loud talk her back, and she tried to grab my arm and take me to the office. I snatched my arm away and said, "I'll go to the office and call my mom for you." And my mom came and straightened that racial thing out. She says, "That's exactly what's going on here." She
Mm.
said, if it ever happens again, I'm not coming back to you. I'm going straight to the school board, and if it don't
Wow.
get fixed there, I'm gonna keep going up until it gets fixed, because this is not gonna happen again. You're not gonna suspend him. I'm gonna take him home today because he's mad. She said, "But you mad too." She said, "He's gonna be here in the morning, and I better not ever hear of anything like this again." And she straightened it out. And since then, I
Incredible.
be I became one of the favorite kids for the teachers and the school because my mom set it straight. So the answer, that's a long answer to your question. I was just one of the kids, but I absolutely knew that I was a black kid. Every black kid knows that they're a black kid in a white situation,
Mm.
right? That's that. If there's an advantage of being black, that's it. Is that we understand white people. White people don't necessarily understand us.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And even the term white people, we're playing a racial game when we say
Yes,
that
sir.
anyway.
Yes, sir.
Because when when Europeans first came here, they were identified by their race of origin.
Western Europeans. I must put that in.
Yes,
Western
yes, yeah.
Europeans.
Western
This
Europeans,
is
the
very,
Europeans,
very important because
very important.
a lot of people don't realize that.
Right,
Look, us Slavs
right.
from Eurasia, from Eastern Europe, we lived completely different
Yeah,
realities.
and truthfully, the
It's a
word
slave.
Slav has a lot to do with why it's the word slave,
Yes, sir.
right?
That's the
Because of the lives that
etymology of
y'all
the
used,
word.
the European life that y'all used to live there. So I recognize that, and that's a good point. The fair skinned people that came here, though, were identified by their countries of origin. You know what I mean? They were Italian, they were German, they were Spanish, they were Portuguese. Until until it becomes important for the survival of the country for these dark people to work these crops, because that's the only
Mhm,
way we're going to survive.
mhm.
So at that point, there's no reason to identify by all these separate races. You're just white, which basically means you're not dark and you're not of this,
Yeah.
you're not of this class. So when we say white people, we're still playing that game. White
Yes, sir.
is not a nationality; it's just a decision made about skin color.
Yeah.
But in term that being said, culturally, black people have an advantage because understanding the people that we call white was part of our survival.
Mm.
Right? You had to understand if the person in charge of the plantation was in a bad mood or a good mood, more generous, which one is going to be nicer to you? It's imperative that you understand white people. Even today, you go to school, your teacher is white, the principal is white, the police officer is white, the banker is white, everybody's white. Black people have to understand whiteness, not in reverse, which is why this is a tough time for a lot of the people that we still call white, because for the first time in history, sometimes they're being held to account, and this being the first time they're encountering it, it feels like attack.
Mm.
That's what you hear a lot in the you hear a lot about that in even in politics. You feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's a backlash,
Mm-hmm.
against white people, and it's just a misunderstanding. Times
Yeah.
are changing.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we push on this channel, and I try to get across to people, as for us to remember that these people that were forming the nation at the time, I don't think that they ever thought, black or white. But when they realized that it works towards their advantage, is when they started to play this game. Because it was originally about the people that they could conquer, let's say, easily, right? Because while the rest of the world was, thinking about their roots and thinking how to pass on to
Mm-hmm.
the next generation, in Western Europe, they were sitting there and thinking, how can we conquer as much land as we can, right?
Right, but it's they were and they weren't. Some were, some weren't. Like the Irish come over to the colonies. They were the first slaves here.
Yes,
So
sir.
they were actually indentured,
Yes, sir.
meaning that you're a slave for a certain number of years and then you gain your freedom at the bottom of the hierarchy.
Yes, sir.